Laura Bennett had 90 seconds to save a dying man's life, or watch him die alone on a dark, rainy road. She did not know his name. She did not know he had $1 billion. She only knew he was bleeding, and she was the only one there to help him. 5 years later, she walked into a big glass office, looked up at her new boss, and froze. It was him, the same man. But this time, he looked at her like he had never seen her before in his life. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Bennett," he said, shaking her hand with a warm smile. "I'm Vance Whitmore. Welcome to the team." Laura's heart pounded so hard she thought he could hear it. This was the man she had held in her arms in the rain, the man whose blood had stained her hands, the man who had once grabbed her wrist and whispered, "Don't let me go." Now he was standing in front of her, smiling like a stranger, because he did not remember any of it. And if he ever did remember, everything Laura had built to protect her son could fall apart in one single second. She shook his hand. Hers was shaking a little. His was not. That morning before this meeting, Laura's life had looked very normal. She woke up at 6, made breakfast for her son Micah, and packed his lunchbox with a smiley face drawn on a napkin because he liked that. She checked his inhaler because his asthma got worse in the mornings. She dropped him off at his grandmother's house, kissed his forehead, and told him she loved him more than the whole sky. Then she drove to her very first day at a brand new job, a job she needed badly, a job that paid enough to finally cover Micah's medicine, without her having to skip her own meals to make it work. She had no idea, not even a little bit, that walking into that office would mean walking straight back into the past she had never fully let go of. Before we go any further, if you love a good love story, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It really helps this story reach more people like you. Okay, let's go back to where it all began. 5 years earlier, Laura was a young nurse driving home after a long night shift at the hospital. It was raining hard. She was tired and worried about paying her rent. That is when she saw it. A car smashed against a guardrail on the side of the road, smoke rising into the rain. She did not think twice. She ran straight to the car. Inside was a man in a torn suit, blood spreading across his chest. She did not know his name. She did not know he was rich. To her, he was just a person who needed help. She tore pieces of her own shirt to stop the bleeding. She screamed for someone to call for help. She held his hand and told him again and again, "Stay with me. You are not allowed to die tonight." When help finally arrived, the man grabbed her wrist with the last of his strength. "Find me," he whispered. "Please find me." She never got the chance. By the next morning, his family had already moved him far away to a private hospital. Nobody told her where. And the crash had hurt his brain so badly that he lost his memory of that whole night, including her. 2 months later, Laura found out she was going to have his baby. She remembered sitting alone in her small apartment, staring at the little test in her hand, feeling scared and happy at the same time. She did not know his last name. She did not know where he lived. All she had was a memory of rain, a torn shirt, and a promise he probably did not even remember making. She thought about trying to find him, but every door she knocked on led nowhere. Rich families are very good at disappearing. So Laura made a choice. She would raise her baby alone, with love, and she would never once make her son feel like he was missing something just because his father was not there. She worked double shifts. She skipped nice things for herself so Micah could have new shoes. She never once complained, because every time she looked at her son's face, she saw the bravest thing she had ever done shining right back at her. Now, 5 years after that stormy night, Laura stood in the break room at Kane Tower, gripping her coffee cup so tight her fingers hurt. She stared at a small star-shaped scar on Vance's neck, just above his collar. It was the exact same scar she had once pressed her hands against to stop the bleeding. She had only taken this job because she desperately needed money to pay for her son Micah's asthma medicine. She never imagined her new boss would be the same man she had saved and secretly loved 5 years ago. Now she had to choose between telling the truth and keeping the life she had built for her son. "You look like you saw a ghost," said Diane, her only real friend at work, sitting down across from her. "Something like that," Laura said quietly, forcing a small smile. What she did not say was that she saw that same ghost every morning. She saw it in her son's laugh. She saw it in the way Micah tilted his head when he was thinking hard, just like Vance did. Sometimes it hurt so much she had to walk out of the room just to breathe. Vance Whitmore had no memory of that night, except for the scar on his chest and a strange dream that kept coming back. Rain, warm hands, and a woman's voice telling him to stay awake. Doctors said this happens sometimes. The brain remembers feelings even when it forgets faces. In the 5 years since the accident, Vance had built his father's small company into a giant empire called Whitmore Group. He used jokes and charm to hide how lonely he really felt inside. He was engaged, but not because he wanted to be. His mother, Constance Whitmore, had arranged the engagement to a rich family's daughter named Priya, calling it good business. While Vance was still in a hospital bed and could not even say no, Vance did not love Priya. He was not even sure he remembered how to fall in love with anyone since the accident. There was an empty space inside his chest that money could never fill, though he never told a single person that. The first time Vance really noticed Laura was 3 weeks after she started working there. She stayed late one night to fix a huge mistake in a building contract that would have cost the company millions of dollars. He found her at 9 at night, still at her desk, whispering numbers to herself like a prayer. Most people would have gone home and blamed someone else for this mistake, Vance said, leaning against the doorway with his usual easy smile. Most people don't have a son who needs to be proud of them tomorrow, Laura shot back, still typing. Ah, so you have morals. How dangerous. He stepped closer, looking at her screen. You fixed it, by the way. You saved this company millions of dollars, and you have only worked here 3 weeks. Don't sound so shocked, Mr. Whitmore. Vance, he corrected her, tilting his head as he studied her face a moment too long, like he was trying to remember a song he used to know. You look really familiar, Miss Bennett. Have we met before? Laura's whole body went cold. I don't think so, she said carefully. I would remember. Too bad, he said softly. And for 1 second his playful smile disappeared, and something honest showed through instead. Because I think I would too. He did not push the question. But after that night, Vance started finding reasons to walk past her desk. He asked her opinion in meetings. He waited a little too long in doorways just to talk to her. Their conversations turned into something quick, fun, and a little bit dangerous, until people at the office started whispering, wondering how long before their boss finally asked her out. You're doing it again, Vance said one afternoon, watching her fix a blueprint with careful focus. Doing what? Being so smart it's making it very hard for me to focus on my own work, he said, smirking. It's rude, honestly. I'm a very busy and important man with a very short attention span. Then it's a good thing your attention span is not my problem. Mr. Whitmore, Vance, he said again, softer this time. And for the record, you are the only thing in this whole building that has held my attention for more than 5 minutes. She should have laughed it off like a joke. Instead, her chest ached because he had once looked at her exactly like this before, in the rain, bleeding, asking her to stay. A few days later, Vance found Laura in the office kitchen trying to open a stuck jar of coffee. He watched her struggle for almost a full minute before he walked over, took the jar gently from her hands, and opened it with barely any effort at all. Show off, Laura muttered. I prefer helpful, Vance said, handing it back with a grin. Also, I noticed you drink way too much coffee for someone who is supposed to be the responsible one around here. I have a 5-year-old at home. Coffee is not a choice. It is survival. Something flickered across his face at the word 5-year-old, soft and unreadable, like a bell ringing far away in another room. A 5-year-old, he repeated slowly. That must keep you busy. You have no idea, she said, smiling despite herself. Tell me about him sometime, Vance said, surprising even himself with how much he meant it. I would like to know. Laura's smile faltered just slightly, guarded, but she nodded anyway. Maybe, she said, someday. He did not push. But he noticed the way her eyes softened whenever she talked about her son, and it made him want to know more, want to understand this quiet, strong woman who had somehow, without even trying, become the best part of his day. If you're already hooked and wondering what happens next, make sure you're subscribed, because this story is about to take a huge turn. Let's keep going. The trouble started one night when Laura stayed late to look through old company files for a permit she needed. Instead, she found a folder she was never supposed to see. It was labeled, in Constance Whitmore's own handwriting, Vance Accident Files. Inside were hospital transfer papers, a private investigator's report, and a signed agreement dated 6 years ago, paying an unnamed nurse $200,000 to stay silent and never contact the family again. Laura's hands were shaking as she read her own name typed at the bottom of a paper she had never signed. Somebody had erased her from Vance's life on purpose, and had been ready to make her look like a liar who took money to disappear. Before she could think straight, she heard heels clicking down the hallway. She quickly shut the drawer, but not fast enough. Constance Whitmore turned the corner, her eyes sharp like a hawk's. "Working late, Miss Bennett?" Constance asked, her voice sweet but cold. "How very devoted of you. Just finishing some files," Laura said, praying her face did not give her away. Constance's eyes flicked to the drawer Laura had just closed. A small, knowing smile crept across her lips. "Be careful which files you finish, dear. Some of them have a way of finishing you instead." Laura walked out of that building shaking, certain of one thing now. Someone had planned this. Someone had wanted Vance to forget her, and that same someone was watching her every move. This changed everything. It meant Vance's accident, and maybe even how badly he lost his memory, might not have been a simple accident at all. It meant someone had a reason to keep Vance from ever remembering the woman who saved his life. And now Laura was standing directly in that person's way. For days, Laura did not know what to do. If she told Vance the truth, she would also have to tell him about their son, Micah. And if Vance believed his mother's lies, he might think Laura was only a liar trying to take his money. But if she said nothing, Constance would keep all the power. Laura decided to wait and watch closely, holding her son a little tighter every night, whispering promises she was not sure she could keep. Vance, who knew nothing about the folder, kept falling for Laura in small, quiet ways. He remembered the sound of her laugh, even during boring meetings. He started ordering her favorite coffee before she even asked for it. One evening, after a very hard meeting with an angry investor, he found her waiting by his office, holding a sandwich she had brought just because she noticed his hands were shaking with tiredness. "You didn't have to do this," he said, quieter than usual. "I know," Laura said. "I wanted to." He looked at her for a long moment. "Nobody gives me things without wanting something back, Laura. That's just how my world works." "Then maybe," she said gently, "you've been in the wrong world." He laughed, a real laugh this time, surprised out of him. "You're dangerous. You know that?" "So I've heard." He reached out and softly tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. "There's something about you," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Like I've missed you before I even met you." For one heart-stopping moment, Laura thought he remembered everything. She thought the rain, the road, the promise, all of it might come rushing back into his mind. Instead, he simply leaned down and kissed her, gentle and searching, like a man reaching for something he lost long ago. And she kissed him back, 5 years of missing him pouring into one single moment that scared her and healed her at the same time. That night, Laura went home floating on air, until she saw Micah's sleepy face waiting up for her, and reality came rushing back in. She sat on the edge of his bed and stroked his hair while he told her, half asleep, about a butterfly he saw at the park. She thought about Vance's lips against hers, and then she thought about the man's forged signature with her name on it, sitting quietly inside a locked drawer at work, like a bomb waiting to go off. Happiness and fear sat side by side inside her chest, and she was not sure which one would win. News of that kiss reached Constance within 2 days. Quick pause. If this story is giving you butterflies, drop a comment telling me what you think happens next. And don't forget to like this video so more people can see it. Now, back to the story, because things are about to get very hard for Laura and Vance. The next big shock came at the company's big gala night. In front of hundreds of guests and news cameras, Constance suddenly announced Vance's engagement to Priya, a whole month earlier than planned, timed perfectly to stop Vance from ending things with Priya the way he had secretly planned to do. Laura stood frozen at the edge of the room, her glass shaking in her hand, watching Vance's face turn pale as his mother pulled him next to a woman he did not love, cameras flashing all around them. Before Laura could even process it, Constance walked straight up to her, smiling for the cameras but speaking low enough for only Laura to hear. "Leave the company by Friday," Constance said sweetly, "or I tell everyone about the $200,000 I paid your name 5 years ago. I can make you look like anything I want, dear. A liar. A woman who took money and disappeared. Which story would you like the world to believe?" Laura's stomach dropped. "I never took your money." "Doesn't matter," Constance said, patting her arm. "It only matters what the paper says. And sweetheart, I am very good with paper." That same night, Laura's world got even darker. Her son Micah suddenly got a very high fever, and his asthma made it hard for him to breathe. Laura rushed him to the hospital at 2 a.m, holding his small hand tightly while doctors worked to help him breathe again. Sitting alone behind a hospital curtain, watching her sick son sleep, Laura finally understood something clearly. She had no time left, no money left, and no more choices left. She could quietly disappear and protect her son from a scandal that was not his fault, and let Vance marry a woman he did not love. Or she could tell Vance the whole truth about that night, about their son, about everything, and hope he believed her more than he believed his own mother. She chose the truth. She always had, even when it cost her everything. If you're still with me, that means you really care about this story. So go ahead and hit subscribe now, because what happens next is going to change everything. The next morning, tired and worn out from a sleepless night at the hospital, Laura walked straight into Vance's office. For the first time in 5 years, she told him everything. The storm, the crash, the scar on his neck, the promise he made her before the ambulance took him away, and the 5-year-old boy sleeping right now in a hospital bed, who had his father's exact laugh, and his father's exact stubborn way of tilting his chin. She placed a small photo of Micah on his desk. Her hands would not stop shaking. Vance went completely still. "You expect me to believe," he said slowly, his voice strange and distant, "that you are the nurse from my accident, that we—" He stopped, his jaw tight. "My mother told me the nurse who found me took money and disappeared, that she was never even real, just a story to explain a missing piece in the report." "Your mother lied to you," Laura said, her voice shaking but strong. "She forged my name on a paper I never signed. She has been controlling what you know about that night since the day you woke up. I don't need you to believe me just because I said so. Believe the scar on your chest. Believe your own son's face." For a long, painful moment, Vance said nothing. He stared at the photo like it might explode. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small, worn piece of fabric he had never shown anyone. One he had kept in every desk he owned for 5 years without knowing why. It was a torn piece of her old nurse shirt, the one she had ripped apart to stop him from bleeding. "I kept this," he whispered, staring at it like it was the first solid thing he had held in 5 years. "I never knew why. I just could never throw it away." His eyes lifted to hers, filling with something huge finally breaking open. "Rain," he said suddenly, gripping the edge of his desk. "I remember rain and warm hands and a voice telling me to stay awake. I thought it was just a dream." "It wasn't a dream," Laura said, tears falling now. "It was me." 3 days after Laura told him the truth, Vance asked to meet Micah properly. Laura's hand shook the entire drive to the hospital, worried about how a 5-year-old would understand any of this. But when Vance walked into that hospital room, he did not talk about money or business or anything complicated. He sat right down on the floor next to Micah's bed, at his level, and asked him about his favorite dinosaur. "T-Rex," Micah said proudly, still a little sleepy from his medicine. "He has the biggest teeth. T-Rex is a great choice," Vance said seriously, like this was the most important conversation of his entire life. "Very strong, very brave. Kind of like you, actually, fighting off this fever." Micah smiled a shy little smile, the exact same shy smile Laura remembered from that hospital hallway 5 years ago, and something inside Vance's chest cracked wide open. He did not need a memory to know right then, looking into a small face that mirrored his own, that this boy was his son. It was written all over him, in the tilt of his chin, in the stubborn set of his little jaw, in the way he studied Vance with careful, curious eyes before deciding to trust him. "Are you my dad?" Micah asked suddenly, blunt in the way only children can be. Laura's breath caught in her throat. Vance looked at her for one long second, silently asking if it was okay to answer. She nodded, tears already falling. Yeah, buddy, Vance said softly, his voice breaking just slightly. I think I am. Micah studied this for a moment, the way small children study big new facts, and then simply said, Cool. Can you bring me a T-Rex toy next time? Vance laughed through his tears. I will bring you the biggest T-Rex toy this city has ever seen. The memories did not come back all at once. They came slowly, in small pieces, over the next few days, triggered by her voice, by Micah's laugh when Vance finally met him, by the smell of rain hitting the ground outside. Piece by piece, the truth came together, and with it came an anger Vance had never felt toward his own mother before. He confronted Constance in her big fancy apartment, laying the forged papers on her table with a coldness she had never seen in him. You stole 5 years from me, he said. You stole my son's father from him. You tried to erase the one person who actually saved my life, because she was not rich enough for your business plans. Do you understand what you did to us? For the first time in this whole story, Constance had no clever words left. I did it to protect you, she finally said, her voice much quieter now. I thought a woman like her would only complicate your life. She didn't complicate my life, Vance said. She saved it. Twice. Priya, who had been listening quietly from the doorway the whole time, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. But they were not tears of anger. I didn't know, she said softly. Vance, I swear I didn't know any of this. I thought this engagement was just business too. I never wanted to marry a man who didn't love me, and I certainly never wanted to be part of hurting a little boy and his mother. She turned to Constance, shaking her head. You used me too. Even Constance's carefully built world was crumbling now, piece by piece, and there was nothing left for her to control. He ended his engagement to Priya that same week, telling the whole company and every reporter the truth, that Laura Bennett was the woman who saved his life on that stormy night 5 years ago, and that Micah was his son. Constance, facing serious trouble for the forged papers, quietly stepped down from her position at the company, her plan to control everything finally falling apart. Laura was scared people would judge her, just like Constance had threatened. But something different happened instead. People believed her, because the truth, once said plainly, simply sounded true. Investor respected a CEO honest enough to admit his own family had done something wrong. Cowworkers who had watched Laura work harder than anyone else for 3 years finally understood why. She was a woman who had already survived the hardest thing life could throw at her, and she had won. Not everyone was kind, though. One man from the finance department, a coworker named Trent who had wanted Laura's job for himself, tried to spread a rumor that Laura had only gotten close to Vance to climb the company ladder. He whispered it in break rooms and dropped hints in meetings, hoping it would stick. But this time, Laura did not have to defend herself alone. Vance stood in front of the whole department during a company meeting and calmly explained, without anger, without shouting, exactly who Laura was and everything she had sacrificed. By the time he finished speaking, the room was completely silent, and Trent quietly resigned 2 weeks later. Laura realized in that moment that the hardest part of her journey was not proving her worth to strangers. It was learning that she never needed to prove it at all. The people who truly mattered already saw her clearly. Hey, real quick, if this story has you smiling, crying, or both, tap that like button and leave a comment with your favorite part. It seriously helps this channel grow, and I read every single one. 6 months later, on a quiet evening with soft rain tapping against the windows, the very same gentle rain that had once almost taken everything from them, Vance knelt down in the garden behind the house he now shared with Laura and Micah. A small box shook slightly in his very steady hands. I don't remember much about who I was before that night on the road, he told her, his voice full of feeling. But I know exactly who I want to be for the rest of my life. Someone who deserves the woman who stayed, even when she had every reason to walk away. Micah, giggling beside them, tugged on his father's sleeve and whispered something that made Vance laugh through happy tears. My son wants me to remind you that you already said yes to being his family, so technically, I just need you to catch up. Laura laughed, crying and nodding before he even finished asking, and 5 years of silence, sacrifice, and quiet strength finally turned into the life she once thought she could never have. Micah cheered so loudly the neighbors probably heard him. He ran in circles around the garden, shouting that he was going to be in a real wedding. And Vance scooped him up onto his shoulders, laughing until his eyes watered. Laura stood there watching the two of them, her son and the man she had once saved on a rainy road, and she felt something settle inside her chest that had been missing for 5 long years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from money or big houses, but the kind that comes from finally being seen, finally being chosen, finally being home. Their wedding was small, held right there in that same garden, under strings of soft yellow lights. Micah walked down the aisle first, carrying the rings on a little pillow, grinning so wide his cheeks must have hurt. Diane cried through the entire ceremony. Even Priya came, sitting quietly near the back, smiling as she watched two people find their way back to each other after everything that tried to keep them apart. When Vance said his vows, his voice shook, not because he was nervous, but because for the first time in his life, he was not hiding behind jokes or charm. He was simply telling the truth. "I don't remember the boy I used to be before that crash," he said, holding Laura's hands in his. "But I know the man I am now, standing here, is only who I am because you never gave up on me. Twice." 1 year later, on the anniversary of the night they met on that rainy road, Vance and Laura took Micah back to that same stretch of highway. It looked completely different in the sunshine, calm and quiet. Nothing like the storm that once changed all 3 of their lives forever. They planted a small tree right beside the road, a simple thing. Roots pressed gently into soft ground. "Why are we planting a tree here?" Micah asked, patting the dirt down with his small hands. "Because something good grew out of something scary that happened right here," Laura told him, smiling at Vance over their son's head. "Sometimes the worst nights turn into the best stories, if you're brave enough to keep going." Vance wrapped his arms around both of them, watching the little tree stand steady against the breeze. And for the first time since he woke up in that hospital bed 5 years ago with a hole in his memory, he did not feel like something important was missing. He felt, finally, completely whole. If there is one thing this story leaves behind, it's this. The truth never stays hidden forever, and the people brave enough to choose honesty and love, even when it costs them everything, are the ones who end up writing their own happy ending. Laura Bennett never asked to be a hero. She simply refused to walk away, from a stranger bleeding on a dark road, from a scary truth, and from a love worth waiting 5 long years for. Before you go, if this story touched your heart even a little, do 3 quick things for me. First, hit that like button. Second, drop a comment telling me if you'd choose truth like Laura did. And third, hit subscribe so you never miss the next story like this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.